RTR Learning is in the midst of launching an entirely new way to learn. And we feel like it's important for new organizations in this space to help define modern learning constructs. So I'm here to explain critical race theory, why it's important to address, and what it implies for education moving forward. This activity only covers the explanation, but you can find more information about it in our other courses. Even though RTR Learning does include critical race theory as a part of our machine learning course, it's too complex of a topic to be being taught in the places where most of you guys are hearing about it. Let's start with a summary of the Wikipedia article, and then I'll explain some of the harder to decipher concepts in terms everyone can understand. When you search for critical race theory on Wikipedia, it returns the following. CRT is a body of legal scholarship and an academic movement of civil rights scholars and activists who seek to examine the intersection of race and law in the United States and to challenge the mainstream American liberal approaches to racial justice. CRT examines social, cultural, and legal issues primarily as they relate to race and racism in the U.S. A tenet of CRT is that racism and disparate racial outcomes are the results of complex, changing, and often subtle social and institutional dynamics, rather than explicit and intentional prejudices of individuals. Honestly, that's not very clear at all. Let's look at the important parts and help everyone understand what that statement is about. First, it's a body of legal scholarship, meaning it primarily deals with legal issues related to race. That's not something currently being taught in schools, so everyone can breathe easy. Intricate legal studies such as these are definitely not taking place in elementary schools, probably not even in high schools. I'll leave the comment section open for anyone who can find where this is being taught. I think that's a pretty fair way to go about it. With that out of the way, let's take a closer look at the focus of the real theory, the hypothesis whether bias exists within our current system, through the mechanics of its overlapping outcomes. All systems require examination to determine if the rules that govern them are biased. System examinations take place in virtual and real settings. And in the virtual world, we can just examine the code. But the real world equivalent of that process is examining penal codes. Just because the rules are written down on a piece of paper instead of a code editor doesn't change the fact they still comprise a system. The first thing to understand about systems is that they are either sustainable or not. So they're all designed with some kind of outcome in mind. Take a system like photosynthesis, for example. Plants absorb energy from the sun, carbon dioxide from the air, convert that into usable energy, and still release oxygen into the atmosphere. As long as all of those elements are present, the system will continue to operate as designed. Nature is a funny way of building naturally sustainable systems, which can be identified as those which don't need external resources to continue to operate. On the other hand, let's look at a traditional automobile. It's also designed as a system, but for this system to work, it needs to convert energy in a manner similar to plants. This energy can be in the form of a battery or tank of gas, but in either case, the energy needs to be converted into something that propels the car forward. The only problem with these systems is eventually they run out of energy, and they require an external energy source to replenish themselves. The need for external resources to continue to operate makes these systems unsustainable. When trying to design a sustainable system, such as a government, these same rules apply. A certain set of resources needs to be readily available for the system to continue to operate as designed. I think everyone should be able to agree with that aspect. The examination of any system bias is meant to determine whether or not any of the rules are disproportionately affecting any resources. In the case of critical race theory, these resources are quantified as human resources. The examination of the rules to determine real-world outcomes includes the legal system in its entirety, extending beyond penal codes to include legislation and policy. When CRT examines social, cultural, and legal issues, primarily as they relate to race and racism in the United States, it's striving to examine a data pool for correlations between social disparities and observable outcomes from existing government policies. The data currently available through public organizations already offers a glimpse into systematic disparities that CRT seeks to examine. At its very core, critical race theory is a data-driven analysis of the systematic rules that govern our society. The theory explores the direct connection between statistics like poverty and crime rate, two publicly reported statistics, but one's never addressed in tandem. In its entirety, critical race theory examines data beyond race, including gender, religious, and cultural disparities that are also revealed through publicly available data. In an effort to make everyone's voice heard, critical race theory advocates for all members of society that lacked representation when the system was created. This piece of knowledge should be enough to get you to explore the next idea. In the next installation, we'll discuss why critical race theory is so important to all of us. Thanks for taking the time to listen.